This conference will now be recorded.
Fine. Um, okay, today, so as we I think discussed on Friday, right? Before getting into the proper engineering sessions, um, we'll start with a few basics on the Java and JVM. The idea is for us to get comfortable with a few basics of the coding stuff, how the Java code is developed, more from a template perspective, how to compile, execute, and get a feel of the this environment, right? The environment where we have these programs, the class file, the objects. So a lot of these things, these names, these terminologies, we are going to always it will keep coming when you are going to do all this profiling and engineering stuff. There's a problem with the particular method. There is a memory leak with this particular object. The particular class files are having a performance problem. So we're going to keep hearing the word of class, the method, the objects, and the important thing is for us to get a feel of what are these things, so that whenever we are going to talk about or provide our analysis to the developers, it will be more of a white box rather than just uh, telling these names, right? That is a more intent of understanding and getting thinking as a developer, right? So once you are comfortable with these, we exactly know how a developer is going to do a work, right? Developer is going to open an Eclipse, he is going to do some imports, create some multiple class files, and create all these methods, objects, and then finally is going to probably do some DB connections, making some HTTP connections, and then you'll go and compile it, and then you will go and create a jar or create a var, deploy it, and then that deployed var file is going to have an URL, which is going to give it to us, where we are going to do this performance testing, right? So idea is at least to get into the foot of a developer, do the all these small steps, so that we know how a developer is going to do it, and uh, that is going to make a lot of sense for us when we go into do engineering area, more from concept perspective, more from a confidence perspective. Okay, so that is the whole idea. We are not going to get into very detail about how exactly all the aspect of a Java programming is going to work, what is the definition of each syntax. We are not going to be a code developer here, right? It is more into related to the engineering aspect, and more into making ourselves comfortable with this runtime environments, where we'll be able to properly do our job and more confidently. That is a objective of having this introduction session into Java before going into the engineering aspect. Okay, so what we'll do today is a quick overview on the agenda of today's session, right? So that we know exactly what we are going to learn today. So we'll talk about, since the next 2 3 weeks, we are going to spend a lot of time in the Java performance engineering. We'll just try to understand, is it going to be relevant or not. We'll just if you spend a few minutes on the Java itself, all right, the more of introduction to Java, and then we'll learn about, talk about the JDK, JVM, JRE, and then how to set up this Java environmental variables, where most of the time we will have a problem running a program or running any software in a mission, which are depend upon Java. And then we will get into the some very basics about Java programming itself, how a Java programming is getting created, the skeleton of Java programs, and then we'll start ourselves coding, right? From Eclipse, we'll try to create a project, create some couple of class files, and then we'll go and create a class file with the DB connection, adding external jar files, adding the imports, and then adding a class file with the HTTP connections. So we'll slowly get into the Java programs, very basic stuff, declaring few variables, creating multiple class file, calling one class file from another class file, and then with DB and HTTP connections. And then we will go on to creating a couple of jar files, war file will deploy into a Tomcat server. We will see all these things in a sequential order. And then we'll get into the JVM architecture. I'm not sure whether we will get time to get into JVM architecture today, but time permits, we will also start on the JVM architecture, which is going to act as a base for the upcoming sessions for the your analysis, Java analysis, right? So I don't know whether we'll get into this anyway today. So we'll first get started with the whatever the agenda I was explaining. Okay. So why Java performance engineering, right? If you look into today's world, where with the cloud, with the DevOps, with a lot of programming languages that are coming every quarter, every year, right? You would have heard about the Angular, JavaScript, Python. Lot of languages are probably coming every 6 months or every 1 year. Okay. Along with that, if you look into Java, Java is what probably more than 1 or 2 decade old, right? From mainframes to web, when people moved to web, Java was along with the .NET. Uh, Java was the one of the primary language which is used to by in most of the enterprise system. Okay, last decade or two. But even now, if you look into it, right, this is uh, comparison of 2017, 18, 19, and 20. If you see Java, will be there in top 2 or top 3, even currently. Most of your banking systems, insurance, your core engines are still running in Java. You would see probably Angular application in the front end, right? Probably Node also in the back end. Pythons are there for most of your machine learning analysis. You would see Python coming into the picture. But if you look at any of your enterprise architecture, you will have at least 1 or 2 core engines running in Java, right? Java being highly portable and your secured and very highly performant language, you will see any of your backend core engines, your server side programming But when we look into the core, one of the core engine, right, which is going to actually do the your server side processing, Java will be there. And probably if you take some few examples, right, Elasticsearch, which is one of the very famous NoSQL database, open source database, right, that is built on top of Java. The database itself is developed on top of Java. And if you take probably one of the open source messaging system, Kafka, right, Kafka itself developed on top of Java. Similarly, probably I will take an example of an e-commerce product, Ibris, right, from SAP. That itself developed on top of Java. So either as a product like Elasticsearch or Kafka or probably Ibris, a product are built on top of Java. Or even if you take a custom developed enterprise applications, you will see. So it is Java is there to stay, and you are going to get the other languages which will complement the Java, where you will have multiple components working together. You will have Python for some processing. You will have probably your Angular as an front end. but Java is going to stay. It's going to stay for probably what, maybe 5 years or 10 years. So whatever we would learn as part of this training course is going to stay relevant, right? That is a confidence we need to have it, because otherwise you will not get a feel of why I should learn when something is going to go off in another 2 years or 3 years, right? When it's not a time worth spending in that, right? For example, if you see JMeter itself, right, it's a Java. Whatever JMeter is built is primarily it's on top of your Java. Your Tomcat server is on top of Java. So it is going to be relevant. Yes, along with that, you may need to probably, depending upon your particular project, particular your customer environment, other things might be there in the picture where you might have to probably expand your knowledge as you go forward. But more from the, if you wanted to get into performance engineering area, and this is the first time you're trying to learn performance engineering from performance testing to performance engineering, but this is a very very uh, preliminary or primary knowledge for you to get it, so that even from your interview perspective, or if you wanted to move within your projects, this is going to be very very important. From here, once you learn Java performance engineering, from there, if you wanted to probably say wanted to go in your project, if you have probably Node.js or Python, or every language is going to um, every language, it would need CPU to run, it would need memory to hold the temporary objects, it is going to access database, it is going to access hard disk, right? So your input output activity is going to there, it is going to consume CPU, it is going to consume memory, uh, it is going to interact with the other components. So considering those primary activities, right, each tool is going to have its own profile, as its own way of handling the memory management. So we need to probably map that to the way Java works, and then try to learn the other things that are required for other languages. But yeah, so that is why I think the base is important, and that is what we are going to start with Java, since it's going to be very popular from the enterprise architecture perspective, and second, more from expectation perspective as well. You're always going to be interviewed more from Java performance engineering, I mean, more from an enterprise perspective. But if at all, if there is going to be a specific requirement where a particular application is developed only with a particular technology stack, then that might be different, right? So to keep it simple, whatever we are going to learn is going to be lot relevant from what you're going to handle it in the probably immediate future, or in the later stage of your career. Okay. Probably these things you might have already known, right? This is not something new. Why people are using Java, right? There are several reasons. Um, but for me, why it is very very important is the community support, right? I'll come to the community support. Before that, we all know that Java is going to be independent of platform, right? I create a simple class file, that whatever you're going to create now today, right? I create this program, I compile it, I get this class file, I get the jar file, right? I can take this directly to a Linux machine, and then I can run it. I can run it in my mobile. I can run it in any of the OS. So that is the advantage of Java. You create something in your Windows machine as a developer, and you can go and execute it in your production machine, which is going to be a Linux, right? So it is going to be a completely platform independent. And one of the most popular open source programming language, Java. Anyway, recently I think Oracle also um, uh, um, have a commercial version of Java, which they say it is very very highly secured, and very very highly performant. But it is up to the enterprise to choose what they want to do it, either to go with the open source edition or to go and use the commercial edition, right? The development track for both are going to be almost parallel. Only thing is there are going to be some more additional features very specific to security and performance as per whatever Oracle claims, right? So since it's going to be since it is still an open source, still an most popular language, when obviously the developer's choice, right? End of the day, it comes to the architect's choice, what programming language it suits for my architecture and what I am comfortable with as well, right? If I wanted to probably build a product where I would need some 30 developers, 40 developers, getting the skill set in the market, getting the kind of people we want. Obviously, Java is going to have a very wide community of developers, right? Just because it is going to be popular. And then for the people who are seniors or architects, or even like you and me, who if we say we are going to be very new to Java, right? The kind of support you will get it from the internet is you will never get it for any other languages. It is like support you get for LoadRunner, like you support you get for JMeter, right? Whatever issue you get it in JMeter and LoadRunner, if you go and search, you'll get a solution. You probably will get 5 or 6 solutions, and you may have to probably select one, right? You may have to try with 1 or 2 options, and it will definitely it will work. Whatever error you will get, whatever exception you will get in your Vuegen scripts or during a controller execution, if you go and search in the internet, you'll get it. Similarly for Java, even not only for issues, even if you wanted to say, I wanted to go and create an array, I wanted to make a DB connection, I wanted to make an HTTP connection, right? If you go and do a search on Google, you will get top 10 recommendation, out of which at least 4 or 5 will definitely work. Okay, the kind of community support for freshers, for experienced people, it is huge. That is a main advantage, where even if you haven't started coding, right, it is not going to take you more than 1 or 2 days for you to get a couple of programs working on its own. You will be able to make a DB connection, you will be able to execute few queries from a Java program, you will be able to make an HTTP connections, you will be able to import files, you will be able to create a jar, you will be able to create a war file, even if you have zero knowledge on the programming skills, right? That is going to be as simple as that. And then from there, I think it is all up to our own passion, our own time, how we can expand our knowledge towards getting into a very good level of comfortness with respect to programming itself. But more from starting your program, starting your Java, it is not going to take any time at all. That is what we are going to see today anyway. But more from you taking confidence, if you haven't done any coding at all, don't even worry about it. It is going to be very simple, similar to what you might have started creating JMeter scripts or LoadRunner script from a scratch, right? So it is going to be as simple as that. We're just going to follow templates, right? In terms of creating programs, make use of the community support, and then do this coding, getting whatever that is required for us to get started. So be confident that you will be able to do it. That is one of the main blocker, right? From our mind, whether I will be able to do it, whether is it possible for me to go and do it. If you can break that thing mindset, I think it's going to be very, very simple. To be very honest, 50% of developers, right, whoever is going to do the Java programming language, they will never know what is happening behind the scene, how JVM works, what exactly is happening in JVM, what are the each and every definition of syntax. Nobody knows. All they will get is they'll get a requirement. For that, they will go and search what is available in the internet, put those code, execute it. They will find some problem, they will go and search it, they will fix it, and then it will start working, right? They will never try to probably optimize it, or they will never know exactly what are those libraries are going to do it, right? Because you're not going to create code after code. All these are going to be available as a library which you're going to import, right? So pretty confident more than 50% of people will start looking into the internet, taking the code, putting it, making it work. And then once you really start enjoying it, then you will go and learn what are the things that are actually there in the library, how to make changes to that, how exactly everything works. Then you will start expanding it. That is where you will then become a proper developer. But to be coding something, you really don't need a lot of things for you to start with. Okay. So anyway, probably that is what we are going to see today on the next section of how to create these Java programs. So before going to that, right, you might have seen a lot of time, even probably JMeter itself, right? It might not work if you don't have a Java in your mission. Lot of other softwares which you might have used will not start working on day one if your Java is not there in that mission. So Java is going to be one of the prerequisite for you your software to work, for most of the software to work, right? There is three things: JDK, JVM, and JRE. If you go to your probably if you already installed Java, right? If you go to your program files Java, you will find something called JDK. Okay, and inside JDK, you're going to have lot of libraries, a lot of folders. It is kind of a folder structure. When you once you install your Java, you will get this folder structure where Java will be there, JDK will be there. Okay, so one small comparison is you can compare your Vuegen, right? Probably I'm just comparing with our load runner always because we know that the way load runner works, JMeter works, it will be easy for you to correlate. That's the reason I'm comparing it, right? Though it is not a correct comparison. So in the load runner, you have Vuegen. You also will have a controller, right? So Vuegen is required for you to create scripts, okay? And then you just run for one or two iteration and everything will work. And then the controller, you will do the actual execution, okay? So for you as a performance tester who does the scripting, you would need you need only the Vuegen, right? Similarly, for a controller machine where your scripts are going to execute it, you will not need Vuegen, right? You will just need the controller software alone in that mission. So similarly in Java, for only for your execution, right? You're not going to create any programs. You're going to run only the Java programs, right? Where you will have a war file, you will have a jar file which is going to deploy in a Tomcat, and you're going to run it. For this, you don't need entire JDK libraries. You all need is the your runtime environment, JRE, where within JRE you will have the your JVM. But if you are a developer, right? If you're a developer, you need an entire kit where you need utilities for you to code, compile, debug. All these things are required. So from if you think entire thing as a folder structure, right? You will have JDK as your parent folder. Within JDK, you will have JVM or JRE, plus you will need other files for compilation, debugging. So JVM slash JRE plus your compilers and debuggers is called JDK. So for a developer, you would need both JRE for running the Java, plus you would need a set of libraries which is required for you to do compilation, to do some debugging. All is required for a developer. So again, going back to the folder structure, right? In your JDK, you will have something called bin. In the bin is where you will have all your important files. Your java.exe will be here. Okay, that is your Java executables. And then if you go into the server, you will have something called jvm.dll. Okay, so since it's a Windows machine, I have something called jvm.dll. If it is going to be say Linux, you will find a different extension. If it is going to be a Mac, you will have a different extension. What exactly this does is that is where the platform independent comes here, right? This JVM for Windows will be able to execute the class files, execute the jar file in JVM in your Windows. Similarly, in the JVM dot whatever extension in Linux will be able to understand the jar file, and that will make it executed in a Linux box. Similarly for Mac. So this JVM specific to your Windows or Linux is what is going to make your Java independent of your programming language, or sorry, independent of your OS, right? So you have this jar file deployed in your any OS. In the JDK, whatever you're going to install in Linux, it's going to have a JVM specific to that OS. In Windows, whenever you're going to download and install, you'll get this jvm.dll. Similarly, when you're going to install this JDK in Linux, you will get a JVM version which is compatible with OS, which is going to take care of your Java execution in each OS. Okay, again, you no need to really go into this detail to understand all these things, but more from our I mean, it is good to know at least from eye level. So when you're going to download, you're going to have the set of files. You're going to have JDK. Inside JDK, you're going to have these folders. In the bin, you will get you'll have a server where you'll find this jvm.dll, and then there is a thing java.exe will be there. If these things are missing for some whatever reason, right, if it's not installed properly, you will not find these things, and which means you'll not be able to execute any of your dependent softwares like your JMeter or your Tomcat or Eclipse. Okay, and then as I said, JDK is also going to have a couple of files for your debugging, right? Java is your compiler. You will find this, and then you will keep hearing about JConsole, your JMap. All these things are utilities for analysis, right? For you and me, for performance analysis, we will use JConsole, we'll use JMap. All these things are required for a developer or for a performance engineer for troubleshooting purpose, but these are not required for actual your application itself to work. All these things are not required. So in a production environment, you might not see in all these folder, all these libraries in the machine. All it is required is your JRE and JVM alone for a program to get executed. But for a developer or for a performance engineer in your mission, you would need all the complete JDK thing if at all you wanted to develop, compile, debug with respect to functional or performance, right? So what happens is, probably in your laptop, if you would have already installed Java, right? Already installed Java and configured your JDK. Most of the time, what will happen is, first thing what you need to do is, probably if you have not done it so far, so you need to check your Java version, right? Java-version is what you're going to check it, and it is going to say what Java version it is currently installed, and it's going to say this means your Java is properly configured and your environmental variables also configured properly. Okay, so first thing is to install your Java, so where you will get all these folder structure, and then when you go into the folder sector, you will find java.exe, you will find jvm.dll, and you will see all those library files. If you see all these things, most likely you have downloaded and installed Java properly. Second thing is to configure the Java, right? So I'm from a command line, I'm just entering Java, right? I mean, how my laptop will understand the command Java, right? Because Java is not a proprietary OS program. So I'm saying Java-version, it is giving me Java version. So for an OS to understand where the Java is installed, we need to set these environmental variables. Okay, for any mission, for all your softwares to get executed with the keywords like Java, right, or Python, right? You need to set these environmental variables so that you will give a name called a variable, and then you will give a path where your Java is installed. Okay, so there will be something called user variable, and there will be something called system variable. Okay, for shared system, right? If a particular system is going to be shared across 3 or 4 users, and if you wanted to probably set Java for all the users, then probably you can set it up at the your system itself. Or if you wanted to probably set it up for your user alone, you can also set it at the for user only. Okay, so probably let me go to the environmental variable. Okay, edit environmental variable. Okay, and then you go to this environmental variable. You will see these things. Okay, you will see something for system variables. You will see Java. Okay, where is Java installed? Java, Java Om. You need to set couple of variables. One is Java, second is Java Om, third is also path. Okay, few software like Tomcat will expect Java Om. Few software will expect your Java path to be mentioned in the path variable. Okay, so first thing what you need to do is you need to also be very careful with the slash bin or so this slash bin will have the, if you have seen that, right, some application will directly look for java.exe, this java.exe. Okay, so you need to give this path hash slash jdk, full jdk path slash bin as your Java. Okay, for a Java Om, probably you need to just give us a this one because few programs might also need some of the files from your libraries. right? For them to access these libraries, you need to provide this JDK path alone. But for your Java, it will directly look for java.exe. So you need to probably give this bin directory in your Java. So Java is one, Java home, and then path. In the path as well, you need to probably give your uh, JDK version, whatever folder name you have it, /bin. So once you give all these three things, your then you go and check your Java version. It should work. Otherwise, you might have probably, most of the time, the mistake what we do is we will probably add some additional backslash, or probably we would have missed giving the bin folder, right? So these are the common mistake what we do it, or probably the variable name probably we will give it wrongly, right? So we need to probably make sure the variable names are given properly, the path is given properly, even the backslashes. Most of the time we will make these mistakes. In a new system, when you're going to do everything from a scratch, we keep making these mistakes, right? So, or in a particular mission, there will be multiple JDK files, right? There might be somebody would have installed probably older version of Java, and in your environmental variables in your path, right? If you look into the path, you can add whatever directory you want, right? It will just accept it. Probably it might the first one, right? What you have to do is you have to move up whatever the new version you have installed. You have to make sure it is on top, right? Otherwise, if there's a JDK say 10 is there, right? It might be in the top, which means even if you, after you added the JDK 14, it will still point to an older version, because it is there, whichever is there in the first appearing in the your configuration in this path, it will take that as a Java path. So make sure in a new mission, that's one of the common mistake what we do. The Java might be already installed in that mission in a particular directory. We might install new Java, but in the path you might have to go and remove that and add the new the folder path, or you may have to put it in the top. So that is what you need to do it, and that's one of the mistake it will keep on happening. Where the Java version, if you go and check, it will still show the older version, and your older version might not be compatible with your Tomcat or with your Eclipse, and you will not even will be able to open your JMeter. It will still throw Java error. So which means you will think I have installed Java, I have added the Java environment, but still it's not working, because the system might have already have your old Java programs, sorry, old Java files, and your environmental variables are still pointing to your old path. So yeah, make sure when you're going to set up these things, you might end up getting this problem, and please make sure your environmental variables are properly configured, and come back to this command line, enter Java version. If it is pointing to a proper Java version, then it is all good. Okay, so these things I will definitely request you to do it and have it ready in your mission, for you to download Eclipse, for you to download before you install Eclipse, before you install Tomcat, because the moment you're going to install Eclipse, it is going to look for Java, similarly for Tomcat, similarly for JMeter. So first step for your learning is set up this Java environment. Okay. Okay, so now my mission, right? That is how you are also going to follow. Before going into coding, I am going to make sure my mission is ready. When I say mission is ready, I have Java installed. My Java is properly configured in the environmental variables. I have validated in the Java version. It is everything working. So now I'm ready to start doing some program, or I'm ready to install my software that is required to create a program, Eclipse or Tomcat, whatever it is, right? So uh, uh, that is how we are going to go with the flow as well. So you as well today, or probably if you already done, it is well and good. You download Java, install Java, and then configure the environmental variables, validate it, done. Then you're now good for going to the next step. Okay, fine. From a Java programming basics, right? As I mentioned in the beginning, uh, we are going to follow this rule. Okay, we are never going to get familiarized with all the syntax. Go in depth of how exactly it works, right? If we start, this is the thumb rule. If we start doing that on the day one, day two for our Java, We will never will learn Java very easily. Okay, we keep on learning about the OOPS concept, the data structures, the control flow algorithms, or the syntaxes, right? If we'll keep on reading all these theoretical stuff, and we'll try to replicate or try to create these programs, right? If we start doing that, we will never go there learning Java very easily or very quickly. The way I recommend is from my experiences. I have tried both the options, right? Always going to the taking some Java books, Java tutorials, and then starting to go through what is Java, OOPS concept, the all these data structures, and we keep on doing it. And one day will not get time because of other schedules. We'll lose interest, and it never happened, for at least for me, when I tried that way, right? But when we start doing this hands-on, it makes you little engaged, little interested, right? So I would say, um, find your requirement on your own. I want to probably do some addition, I want to do some subtraction, I want to make some DB connection, I want to call another URL, I want to probably store something, right? I want to get some input, store it in a file, read. So create the small requirements, and for that you start writing a program. How do you write a program? Go and search it. Go to the internet, search for how to make a DB connection, how to make HTTP connection, how to create an array, how to read a file, how to create a file, how to write a file. You will get lot of suggestions, and you pick one or two. It will work, it will not work, probably another one will work, and you compile it. It will get executed. Now you know the program is working. You're reading a file, you're copying a file, you're getting into doing input, output. There's some addition, subtraction, everything is working. Then you go and learn what is the syntax in that library, or what is the syntax in that program which you copied from the internet. Then try to understand, okay, this piece of line is doing this piece of line is doing this, right? So once you do this iteratively, right, you fix your requirement, find a code in the internet, then code it, then execute it, and then try to learn. It will be more easy for you to do this iterative way of learning, right? Other way around, if you're going to do it, read some theoretical stuff, you itself go and create a program, and then try to learn. Then if you try to learn what an each and every syntax is, what is println is doing, what is your main method, what is the main method, what is a void, what is a static, what is all these things, if you try to dig into it, you will never try to easy to understand all these Java terminologies. So other way around, you go other way around, fix your requirement, copy some algorithm from your internet, code it, execute it, and then try to learn what is there inside each and every line, right? That will be more easy for you to pick it up. It will be lot more engaging, lot more interesting as well. Once you see some program is running, right, then you will get automatically interested in doing it. Okay? That is what we are trying to do it here as well. So for you to get into that level of you yourself declaring some requirement, creating some programs, you need some kind of a basic kind of a template for you to create a programs, right? Probably when you might have created a load on scripts or JME test scripts, right? You never would have thought about what is there in user in it, what is there in action, what are each and LR function is going to do. You never would have thought about it. Maybe after some time, probably you would have learned about what exactly it is there, what are those C functions. Even now, we might do a lot of things without even knowing what exactly inside that load runner functions, right? Few people would have mastered it, few people would have never thought about it, because you would never really required for you to understand the underlying concept of load runner, the way it works for you to do the scripting. Similarly for Java also, we will follow the similar thing. We'll always go something called your template coding, right? I call it as a template coding. You have certain things in place which is always going to work. Okay, if you look into one small program, it is going to have a one class file, one method. If you look into an enterprise application, it's going to have 100 class file, 100 methods. So once you know how one simple class file is going to get created, you can always you're going to replicate it, right? So we'll start with this kind of a skeleton or template coding, and then we'll try to see how you can probably expand further if at all you wanted to go into depth of Java programming. Okay, so one, from a program skeleton perspective, any program is going to have a class file, a object, a method, a package name, and couple of imports. Okay, so these are the few things which will keep on appearing in every Java program. And then in every Java program you need variables, right? You need to probably store something. You are going to get some input, store something temporarily, and for your execution, right? So you're going to have all these integers, your booleans, your strings, arrays. Okay, so we're going to see these two things, your Java program skeleton and data type. Okay, so I'll probably try to explain it with an example. Okay, class is going to have a kind of template which is going to have two things. One, it is going to have your some variables declared for storing the data, and then you're going to have a method which is going to do some execution. So two things. One, you, for a simple, very simple example, right? If I want to do an addition, A and B are going to be by data type. A is going to be an integer, B is going to be an integer. I need to do this operation, right? I need to do a addition. For that, I will have a method where a method name will be an addition, where I will do A plus B, and so storing it in a C. C is another integer. So every class file is going to have data declared, where you will declare integer A, integer B, integer C, and then you will have a method where you will do a plus B equal to C. Okay, so this is a very simple template of a class file which is going to have two things. One is going to have your uh, something called state, right? State is nothing but as I said, an integer or a character or a boolean. For an example which I am given in the slide, right? There is something called name, age, color, sex. All these things are variable. I declare name as a string. I will declare age as an integer, color as probably a string, sex as something again as a string, right? So all these things are called as state of an your uh, any program. Okay, behavior is probably a person is doing something, so you will do addition, you will do subtraction, right? Similarly, you will have this name. A name could be Raj, or name could be probably some Akhil, right? So this person Akhil, what he is doing is eating, or he is drinking, or he is running. He's yeah, this Akhil age is 10, Akhil age is 12, or probably your another person, whatever you're going to name it as, right? Name 1, name 2, name 3, he might be having a different color, different age. So this state will keep on changing, right? And the behavior will keep on changing. Okay, so for our real-time example, I will give it. Okay, you have access to your e-commerce application, right? I have used my Amazon.com or Flipkart. Okay, in the application whichever deployed will have a couple of class files. Okay, which will say, for example, it will have a product class file, which will get an input of a product name. It will also get an input of quantity, right? So this class file will have two things, as I said. One, it will have this data which is going to say integer is quantity, string is product. Okay, and then in the method it will do a calculation of say, to find out a price equal to quantity into cost of a product. Probably in the method they would have declared, if the product is a laptop, the cost is $1,000. If the product is mobile, product cost is $2,000. So in the method, what it will do is it will find out the price. Say you in an e-commerce site, you're trying to, from a web, you are selecting a laptop and you giving a quantity as 2. It will come to our server side program. In the class file, it will create an instance of that class file for user A. Okay, user A is accessing the website and is ordering a laptop with a quantity 2. When it comes to the server side, when there's a call coming from a browser to server, for finding out the product price. There is a class file where we would have declared the product name, we would have declared a quantity, we would have declared a method which is going to provide you this calculation of product price. So for a user A, your server, your JVM will create a instance of a class file, right, which is called as an object. For a user A, object A will be created. For user B, object B will be created. There's only one class file, okay, which will have this variables, which will have the product. But for a user A, it has to give the price for a laptop. For user B, for me, I'm ordering a mobile. For me, it has to give the product price for mobile. But there is only one class file, right? So for each user, a JVM will create an instance called object, okay? Kind of a, you can call it as a shadow, or you can call it as a mirror. It's an instance, okay? There's a one class file. For each user, JVM will create an instance of that object, okay? So for a user A, user A is ordered laptop. So the response which is going to come from a server is, for a laptop, for a quantity of 2, what is the price that is going to appear in your UI. For me, for mobile, I ordered a mobile, same class file, but the object instance that will be created, it will change the behavior of the state. Just to more from a state and behavior or Java keywords, right? For just to compare that with, for you, the state of your product is laptop. For me, the state of the product name is mobile. For you, the state of the quantity is 2. For me, it is 1. Finally, the price, it's going to be your some $2,000. For me, it is going to be, say, for $500. So all these states are going to change as per whatever you going to provide the input in the UI. For that, your instance will be created for a class which is called an object. Okay, there's going to be only one class file, but for a multiple user, multiple objects are going to get created, and it is going to get destroyed immediately, right? It is not going to stay forever. So that all these things we are going to see it in the, when we are going to talk about all these memory concepts. But from a Java perspective, from a template perspective, you're going to have a class file which is going to be your actual program. The program is going to have your two things. It is going to have your state. State is nothing but it's going to be data variables, which is going to store your all the temporary data in your variables, and it's going to have an object which is going to get created as per the need. Whenever there's a 10 user going to access this class file, 10 object instances will be created for that particular activity. And then inside a class file, you're going to have a method which is nothing but an operation, right? Addition, subtraction, making a database connection. All these things are going to be with a method which is going to act on this state. Whatever data variable you're going to pass, it is going to use those data variable, and it is going to do some operation. It is going to give an output. Okay. Then package. Package is nothing but grouping of all this class file, right? There's a one project, say e-commerce project. It will have a class file for searching a product. It will have a deleting a product from your cart, for checking checkout, for calculating the price. It might have 3, 4, 5 different class files. So all these things put together is called a package. Nothing to do with anything else, right? Just a grouping of all your class file into one single package. Next is something you will see is as an import. Probably even in a load runner, you would have seen lot of import, right? There will be pre-written libraries for your mathematical operations, for your string manipulations. So not every time in Java you're going to create the code by yourself. You're going to reuse it, right? There are two types of reuse. One, you create some programs within your organization. You'll reuse it for your all purpose. Say a login module, something very is going to be common. You create a login module, and your code developer will also use the same module. No, you no need to go and repeat all these things, right? So you can import the other people's jar file, other people's class file, or you might download something from your internet. Say for connecting to a database, MySQL database, there is going to be a jar file which is going to do the job. You're not going to write all the 1,000 lines of code for making connection to Devi. You will write only one line of code, which you will see it, right? So import is to import other people's program into your program so that you can reuse it. Okay, so your class, object, method, package, import is the one which is going to be part of your Java program skeleton. And if you know about these things, whatever I have explained you, right, I think that is more than enough for you to understand how the Java program is going to work. And we will keep it as simple as that, right? It will have a lot more other things, but we don't want to complicate ourselves at all, right? We'll just go with this simple example of what class file is going to have, and each class file is going to have these data types, these methods. It's going to do some operation. It is going to store some data in this variables, and it is going to give the response back to the user. And for every user, there is going to be instance created for the class file. Okay, and then your package or imports are more to do with the giving a assembling all your class file into one package. You'll give a package name, and then to get your other people's jar files or class files, you will do an import. Okay, and when it comes to data type, we will see lot of data type in the when we talk about memory handling. Okay, this primitive and non-primitive, stack and heap, right? This primitive and non-primitive are related to the stack and heap memory. Right, logically they have grouped a few things under primitive and then few things into non-primitive. Okay, the way the JVM is going to handle the memory, because every int, every byte is going to hold some memory, right? If you're going to declare an integer as a product, or sorry, integer as a quantity, probably it will hold a memory of 1 KB or 2 KB. Similarly, Boolean will hold some memory, character will hold some memory, strings are going to hold memory, right? So the way the JVM is going to handle this memory, they will logically group into primitive and non-primitive. And for a very quick, easy understanding, all primitive will start with the lowercase. All your non-primitive will start with the uppercase. Okay, that's just more a way Java syntax. Okay, but more from the logical grouping, it is done by JVM such that it will allocate memory for primitive in certain area, for non-primitive in certain area within your JVM. Those things we will look into it when we go in detail about the JVM architecture and the JVM memory handling, the stack and your heap. That section we will look into it. But more from a Java programming language perspective, there are going to be two data types, and we are going to use those two data types for storing the data. Okay, so
Hello, Sudhir. Hey,
yeah,
sorry for interrupting. So, one quick question: is it going to be like a interactive session, or it's like the questions have to be asked after the session?
Okay, so it can be both. Okay, we definitely, if something is you have a question that is something you required for you to get an understanding of what I'm talking, right? If it is really important to be asked, you feel free to ask it. Okay, and then if I think that is something very relevant for everyone, I'll try to answer it immediately if I know it. If it's something I don't know, I'll get back to you. Or if it requires a detailed discussion, probably we'll do it end of the session, or probably we'll carry forward it. So there's no strict rule into it.
Okay,
You can
sure.
ask in
So
between
yeah,
questions.
I'll just go ahead and ask
Yeah,
it. Maybe you can decide whether to answer it later or.
sure, sure, sure. Sure.
Okay. So the question is, I mean, the primitives, does primitive store in stack and non-primitive store in heap?
Correct.
Okay. All right, then go ahead, please.
Correct. Yes, yes. But how it is done, we will definitely, because that is very important, more from understanding the JVM architecture, which we will look into it in detail. Okay.
Sure, please go ahead.
Fine. Sure. Fine. So now let's get into some hands-on, right? Let's try to in the Eclipse, we'll try to create a few programs, and we'll try to compile it and see how this is really going to look like. Okay. Let me go to my Eclipse workspace. Okay. So once you come to the Eclipse first time, right, while installing it, it would have obviously asked you, or it would have picked your JDK version by itself, okay, so that your Eclipse will be now all ready to create a Java program and then compile it and execute it. Okay, so first thing, once you come here, you can probably go to the new, create a new Java project. Okay, give some whatever name you want. Okay, or whatever it is, right? So and then it will start picking your JRE or JDK by default, while whatever you used it while installing the Eclipse. Just give next, and then it will automatically create a source folder for the Java project. Okay, just give finish. It's the module info Java is not required for us. Don't create it. That's it, right? So you'll get this. Okay, and then once you have this, now you have created a Java project where automatically it will put all your JRE inside this. If you look into it, right, whatever that is required for this project to work, it would automatically import all these Java files. Okay, this JRE system library will be automatically, it will get appended for your any project. You don't need to again worry about it. It is Eclipse to handle all these things. Then you can probably go and add a new. First thing is you have to go and add a new class file. Okay, so we are going to create a first new first class file, and it is you can give whatever name you want. First Java program. Okay, and you are for your main method, or for the first class file, whatever you're going to create it, probably you need to just check this public static void main, because your Java will look for a main method for an execution. Okay, if, say for example, if you want to have 2 or 3 class file, and within one class file, at least anywhere within one class file, you should have this one main method. Main method is where your execution will start. It is like you say user init, right? In load runner, we will have user init. Your program is going to start from user init. Okay, similarly, just comparison I'm saying. So in your project, in your session 3 as a project, you can have multiple class file. You are going to create 10 class file or 20 class file. In any of those one class file, you should have one main method. That is where it will your program will get started. Okay, I'll just say finish. You'll get this. Now this is your first program which you have created, right? And then you can then go and probably add whatever you want. Like you can go and just add couple of variables like integers or strings, or probably can just go and do some printing, and then probably create some methods to do some operation, right? So all these things probably you can start one by one once you created a project, once you created a your first class file. Okay, so what I have done with my sample demo project is similarly I just created my Java as a program, as a project, and I have created a multiple class files. Okay, we'll just go one by one. In the demo 1.java, what I have, so without this it will look like whatever we have. Once you create a sample class file with a main method, you will get something like this, right? Okay, and then what I've done is I just created some primitive variables, integers, value 1, value 2. Okay, and then some boolean here, some flag 1. Okay, and then I just printing out something. Okay, and then probably I'll not use these things. Okay, so this is going to be one class file, single class file, where it is going to do some printing. It is just going to do some it is going to, we have declared some variables, primitive variables, some flags. It is going to do some operation, say value 1 plus value 2, and it is going to give the sum. Okay, so if it is going to run all well, which means your Eclipse is installed properly, it is properly pointing to your Java machine, Java path, and it is getting executed as well. Okay, so it is saying I am here, it is printing the I am here, and then it is printing the sum 22, and then it is again printing something. So this is something very simple program, nothing logic here. I'm just making sure my program is working. So I have given some print statements, and then I'm just declared few integers. I'm just doing some very basic addition, and then I'm printing it. Okay, if there are any errors in that, it will automatically throw saying there's a problem, there's something missing, insert. You will get all kind of recommendations here for you to go and probably fix it. Say if I don't have value 1, okay, it will say value is not declared, create a value. Okay, so you whatever error you will see, you will also get some kind of recommendation. There's a warning bulb symbol, it says we have declared but it is not at all used. Okay, so all these kind of recommendations, you will see it for you to fix it. Similarly, what you see it in a Vuegen also, right? If there are any errors, it will give you some warning and help. So similarly in Eclipse you will get all these help as well. So once you have this, now we have a one single class file, right? Say if you wanted to create two class file and call one class file from another class file, we have seen about creating an object, right? So let's understand how this is going to work. Say for example, I have a demo2 Java file. Similarly, I've just created a went to file, created a new class file, and in the new class file, I have again I have created a method called method1. Okay, and then inside that method, if you see, I have declared some boolean, some float, some character, some string, primitive object, and then inside this method I'm doing this value1 and value2. Okay, and then printing it. Okay, this value1 and value2, okay, I'm getting it from the my whichever class file is going to call this class file, they will pass this value and value2. Okay, for example, the declaration for, so don't worry about, again, don't go in depth about how I'm going to declare this, how this is exactly going to work, right? We'll keep it very simple. I have a two class file. One, I have a demo1, I have a demo2. Demo1 is my main method. Okay, in the main method, I have declared few variables like value1 and value2. Okay, instead of doing this sum here, there is another class file where somebody would have created. Okay, and I'm going to use their class file. Okay, I'm not going to do this addition here. Okay, I know to repeat the activity, same thing here. I will make use of other people's class file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a instance of this class file. So demo2 is a class, another class file where I'm going to call this class file, but I cannot call this directly. So I'll create a instance of the demo2. That is what we call it as a creating an object. I'm creating an object called myOPER. I can give whatever name I want. Okay, so I'm creating a object called myOPER. Okay, and then I'm creating a instance of demo2. Okay, I'm creating object new demo2 is an I'm creating an instance of the demo2 object, sorry, demo2 class file, and naming it as myOPER. So I have created an object called myOPER now. Okay, so this myOPER, with this myOPER, I'll be able to access all the methods that is there in the this class file. So there's a method inside demo2 called method1. Okay, so this method1, I'm doing my myOPER dot method1. Okay, so from my first class itself, I'll now be able to execute my second class files method. Okay, because I have created an instance of the demo2 class here. Okay, so it is more of I mean, you can simply say you want to reuse the demo2 for demo2 class file in your demo1 class file. Okay, so I'm going to say myOPER dot method1, whatever I've given it here, and then I need to pass this value, because my method, if you see method1 declaration, it will ask for value1, value2. The input for method1 is 2 integers. If you don't pass it, it won't work. So when I'm going to call this method1, I'm going to also pass two things called value1 and value2. Okay, so this is how you're going to create two class files, and from one class file you can call the another class file method through by creating an object. First thing, you'll create an object. This is a common syntax, nothing to probably think about it, right? Always say you'll give a class file, the second class file name, followed by some whatever name you want to give to your object. This is my OPR or my object, whatever it is, equal to new, again the class file name and this two open brackets. Okay, once you're done, automatically if you give this my OPR dot, right, it will list down all these things, whatever you can do that with this object. You can probably do some weight or whatever it is, and what if there are going to be 10 methods in that class file, it will list out all these 10 methods. So method 1 int value 1 comma int value 2. Okay, so here the declaration will automatically, it will come. You don't need to even if you don't have access to the code, right, even then you will know what's the declaration of this method. This method 1 will expect you to pass two integer values, so you're passing it here. You're passing the integer value as value 1 and value 2, which are declared here. Okay, and then you will in the method 2, so when you say this method, right, when you call this method will be called, and all these things will be executed, and it will return the sum. So it will say return sum. So this sum will be returned back to the to your main program. So sum is what 5, whatever we are going to add it, right. This is going to return the sum, which will be used by your demo 1 class file. Okay, I'll also probably try to explain you with the e-commerce application, whatever we discussed, right. We talked about a product, a quantity, calculating the price. I think that will be easy for us to correlate with whatever example we used earlier. So before that, from a template perspective, even if you're just going to copy this and then execute it, right, I mean, again, don't go in depth about what is there inside public, static, void, main, string, argus. It's all going to be syntax. You're going to use it once you execute couple of programs. Then if you want to learn what is void, what is static, then do it, not at the beginning. Okay, we'll just go with the templates. The first class file will have this public, static, void, the main method. Other class files will not have this main. It will just have the this declaration, just method names. Okay, you can have multiple class files, but only in one of the class file you will have this main method. Okay, this is where your program will start. When you're going to run this, file, your Eclipse or the JVM or your will go and search if there is a main method, and it will start from there. Say for example, I will not be able to execute this directly. If I'm going to do right click, I will not have this run application at all. I'll not have this option at all, because there's no main method here. Okay, only in the demo 1 you will have this right click. If you have this, you will have Java application, because only here you have this main method. Okay, so you will not be able to execute demo 2 standalone. No, you will not be able to do it. Okay, only here you will be able to do it. From here we have created a few integers, few variables, and then there is a demo 2 where we have created an object of that. Okay, and then we have created, we call this method, and then in this method this thing will get executed, and it will get return the sum value. Okay, so comparing with our example, right, I have two files called cart.java, price.java. Okay, price.java is the class file which is going to have an algorithm to calculate the quantity, calculate the price of your product. Okay, so some developer might have created an algorithm in the price.java to calculate the price value, right. Price value is nothing but cost into quantity. Okay, so this is a second class file where this method will get an input of product and quantity. Okay, and then take this as an input. Okay, and then it will check if product equal to laptop, cost equal to 2000. So ideally in a proper project, this cost will come from a database, right. In the loop, it will go to the database, it will search for Lenovo laptop 2103 model. The cost, it will go and take it from the database, and it will be stored here. But for our example to understand this, so this program is going to calculate the price value. It is going to accept product and quantity, and then it is going to do the calculation of cost into quantity. It is going to return the price value. Okay, and in the another program where I'm going to receive this input, right, from a UI, from a browser in Amazon.com, you would have selected a laptop, you would have entered a quantity. Okay, this program ideally will receive this input from UI. Okay, there will be from your web through an parameter, it will be passed into this program. Okay, this to this cart file, to this cart class file, this parameter will come through your HTTP call. The HTTP query parameter, you will have something called product equal to laptop, quantity equal to 2. This that from that query param from your URL, that will be retrieved, and this class file will receive that parameter. But for our example purpose, I'm just hard coded it, assuming that it is coming from the UI. Okay, so this laptop is there, 2 is there, and then I need to calculate the price. Okay, for that I'm creating a object of my price.java. I'm saying price, my OPR is my object name, new price of. Okay, this one, and then I'm doing a calculation. I'm doing my OPR dot price calc is my object, sorry, my method inside the here, my price calc. So I'm calling this method similar to what we did earlier. Okay, so I'm just using my OPR dot price calc of product comma quantity. I'm passing these two things because my price.java will expect two things. One, as a one string, it will expect what is the product name, and quantity, it will expect what is the quantity. So I'm passing this product and quantity. This I have declared as a laptop and quantity. Okay, then it is going to get executed, and it is going to find out the price, and it is going to provide that to a total price value back to my program. Okay, so in this case I'm saying quantity equal to 2, so probably I'll change it to 3. Okay, and then laptop and 3. So the price that has to be calculated will be my product laptop is 2000, so it should print the value as $6,000 now. Okay, so I'm just going to run this. Probably I'll save this. I'm going to run this. It says product price is 4,000. Probably it is not saved it. Yeah, that's why it's giving 4,000. It didn't save properly. 6,000. Product price is 6,000. So laptop is product is laptop. Quantity is 3. Okay, so it is doing the calculation of 3 into 2,000. Now, if I'm going to say, probably I'll say my product as not as a laptop, probably mobile. Okay, somebody is ordering a mobile now. Okay, from a web UI through HTTP query parameter, this class will receive a product as mobile. Okay, then let's see what it is going to do. It is going to create an instance of the second object, and then call the method, and it's going to give the price back to the thing as $900. Okay, so 3 into 300. Okay, so this is how your actual application is also going to work. You are going to receive this from a UI, and your class file is going to receive that from a HTTP query param, and it's going to call some other programs where it will pass this value. Okay, it will pass this value, and the actual program will do this calculation either by connecting to a database, or it will connect to another HTTP call to another systems, and it is going to get those response. It is going to do this processing and give back to your original file, and this will in turn go give this price value back to your UI through your HTTP response. Okay, so we have just seen an example of 2 class files, right? In ideally, there are going to be multiple class files repeating this activity everywhere. Input, processing, output, class, calling another class file through an instance, calling their methods, and the actual method will in turn will have some multiple DB connections. Will have it might call other HTTP connections also to say third-party servers. It is going to get the response, give it back, and that is how your flow is going to work. Okay, for us, for what we did now is just create class files and couple of methods, did some processing variables. Okay, what I will do is, yeah, I'll just conclude, right? What I'll do is I'll not go to the DB connections or HTTP connections. I think we need to create jar files, war files, all these things. We'll do it tomorrow. I'll pass it here, and I'll probably will take your questions.
Okay, thanks, Satish. So my question, I'm just going back to your previous example of laptop and mobiles. Okay, a person who ordered, let's say user 1 who ordered laptops is ordering a mobile phone. Now in the server side, is it going to create a different object for the same user, or the same object is being called, or else it's all depends on the number of classes present in the server side coding?
See, every time, so this price calculation is going to be done, right? So say for you have logged in and first time you picked a laptop, okay, and you're saying calculate price, okay, it is going to go to the server, and then it is going to hit this class file, it is going to create this instance, okay, and then it is going to calculate the price and it is going to give this response back to the user. Okay, done. This object is created and it is all done. Okay, second time when you are going to again say now we wanted to check not Dell, you want to check the HP, and then you selected an HP product, and then you're going to click the calculate the price. Again, it's going to come and it's going to create another object instance. Okay, and then it is going to tell this time is the HP laptop and the quantity as one. Give me the price. So all these objects are going to be created and then destroyed instantly when there's a reference going to go out. I will not go into that level. To answer the question, these objects are going to be created every time. These objects are not going to be reused for within the session or within the for other user. Again, developer can also probably control a bit by say how we can use the already existing object for a particular HTTP call. He can decide, but in general, the way it works is for every time a class file is going to get invoked, it will going to create the instance, because if you see the program flow, right, it will come to this the class file, and then moment it comes to the public this class file, it is going to create an instance and then do this method operation. So before method operation, there will be an instance created.
Right. I mean, immediately after once the invocation and call is completed, it is going to going to get garbage collected, or like we cannot see now.
It might collect immediately, or it might probably wait for some more time that JVM actually handles that when it will be garbage collected or not. Say for example, there's an operation my OPR dot, we are doing some method operation, right? And method operation is still running. And from this method, you might have called some other method, and that method is doing some other HTTP connection. It's all doing a lot of other activities, right? Which means this object reference is still there within this particular thread. So it might stay a little more longer. But yeah, as you said, once this object is created, used, and response is all done, this will go out because every object is going to hold a certain memory, right? When I say my OPER, this is going to hold this has to hold this product, this has to hold a quantity, whatever we have declared inside that class 2 file, all these things are going to be available as part of the memory, right? So once your object is done, memory has to be removed. So that will be done by the garbage collection. But again, let's not go into that area at all, which we'll deal it later. Yes, object will be created, destroyed.
Right. Okay. I mean, I'm just going to my second question. Let's say if I'm running with 10 user load test, okay, and maybe I know you are going to explain about the MAC tool in future, but in that, can we say like how many objects are created for this user? The user 1 created these many objects, user 2 created these many objects. Those kind of details can we get in MAC tool?
Yes. Yeah, live objects, right? But it is going to keep on changing. But at every when you're going to okay, explain it a bit, right? When something is running, when you're going to run a road test, there are going to be multiple objects that are going to get created, and every objects are going to have some memory. That is what you will see it in your memory graph, right? Memory going from 100 MB to 300 MB, 500 MB, 800 MB. As you ramp up, your memory will also get increased. And then after some point of time, when you reach a steady state, you will also see memory probably in a steady state where it will be completely in 1 GB or probably going to 1.1, coming down to 800 MB. That is a steady state what you will see. So all these objects are going to get created, destroyed, right? So this whatever the number of objects created, destroyed, number of live objects, number of shallow objects, retain object, all these concepts, you will be able to see it when you take a dump of it. From a monitoring perspective, you will see only what is the total memory consumed, like 1 GB. But what is there inside that 1 GB? For that, you need to take a dump of your memory, right? Then that dump, you can read it in the tool, whatever you said, like memory analyzer tool. Using that tool, you'll be able to read through what is there inside your dump, what is there 1 GB is there, whether there is any leak in that, if it is a leak, which class file is having that leak. All these things you will be able to look into the mat.
Right. But can we
Memory
distinguish like out of 10 users, each user, how many objects it created? Can we distinguish based on the users?
No, 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 no. I don't think so. Because for JVM, it will create. See, probably it will tie back to threads, right? It will say probably thread 1, thread 2, thread 3, but you never know which user is using thread 1 or thread 2. If you see the trace, right, it will say the thread 1 is holding this memory or thread 5 is holding this memory. That level you might get that mapping, but again, it will not be mapped to your actual users, like your load runner users or actual users. That level of information you will not get it.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. But again, that is also not even required. But because all we want is, there is a memory problem, we want to know which class file is having this memory problem. For example, in this class file, I have created some 1 million objects or 1 million arrays, right, which is not getting flushed out. What I want to know is, while I'm taking a dump, the dump should point me to which class file is having a problem, which method is having a problem. That information you'll get it. But is it because of the user 1 or user 2? That is not something
Okay.
really not possible and also not required.
Understood. I'm just saying that because maybe if we know, let's say user 1 is executing a different scenario and user 2 executing a different scenario, maybe we can identify like which performance scenario is actually having some bottleneck, something like that. I know, I understand. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. That is why we do early. That is why we do early performance. In that, we will isolate a problem, right? That is what we're going to see it. As part of the shift left, we will take each and every functionality before doing a load test. We will take each and every functionality, make sure there is no leak. That is what we will do it, and we will also look into that in depth in the upcoming sessions.
Sure.
Okay.
So I have some other questions. Maybe if I'll just give for.
Sure. What you can also do with other questions, probably you feel free to update that Q&A sheet as well, so that we'll not forget. Number one. Number two, I'll also address it offline or online in the during session also.
Okay. I mean, one question, Satish. So let's say you're running this cart.java. Can you say, I mean, from Eclipse, okay? We know we can have this kind of heap size limits in the VM arguments, but by default there won't be nothing, right? So I want to know how much of heap size is allocated for this particular program, default size. How can I know it from Eclipse?
Eclipse.ini file will have all the settings, right?
Sorry?
Eclipse.ini file will have all the settings, heap settings for this Eclipse, yes.
Oh, that will have all the minimum and maximum. Okay,
yes.
Through which it runs. Okay.
Yes.
See, one, as a proof, you want to see it really what is getting allocated. You can probably parallelly open your Visual VM or JConsole, and you will be able to look into exactly what is getting allocated. Or yeah, in the VM arguments, if you are going to give it, that is what it will take. Or as Prasad has mentioned, you can also probably a couple of settings minimum keep.
Okay. And yesterday while installing the tools, I realized like Visual VM works only for the versions Java 9 or below, right? I see that you have installed 14 Java. Are you going to install it again? The Java 14, with Java 14, we don't have Visual VM coming up with JDK, right?
Yeah, it won't come with the JDK. Yes, that is correct. I think in few installables, JVisual VM will not be there, but you can download JVisual VM directly from the website.
Yeah, but if you have JDK, I mean, that's what I read. Maybe I'm wrong. When you have Java more than greater than 9 version, you may not access the Visual VM. That's
possibly it would work.
I think it is
the exact.
I think it is from no,
Yeah.
Oracle. Oracle it is. So they're not providing for open source. What are you saying? 14 is from Oracle or OpenJDK it is?
Oracle?
Oracle then it should be available. Maybe there they might be charging in future separately. It is. I don't know.
See, they always claim that a few things might get probably commercial maybe in the future. But now, if you go and download even the open source version of JDK, you will not find the JVisual VM. But I downloaded it separately, and it is working. I mean, I don't see a problem with JVisual VM. Yeah, this is what I have it, right. I don't have a problem with connecting to any of the Eclipse or the application that is running in a Tomcat. It connects properly. So if you have installed and then it didn't work, let me know, or it should work. This 2.0.2 version, it works. And the path, whatever I've given it in the software link also, it actually that is where I downloaded it as well. So it works. So it is automatically listing Eclipse as Java program.
This did not work, but
Automatically.
okay, I went back to Java 8, then it opened. Okay. I mean, last question. Sorry if it is taking more time. Why do we give this Java home path? No, all the utilities, everything are available in Java bin path, right? Why to give Java home path separately?
Java Home, as I said, right? I think I don't know whether Tomcat or JMeter. I don't know which one. That was expecting a environmental variable name called Java Home. For one of the software, I don't know which exactly. That I don't know whether Elasticsearch somewhere. I think that software was referring to the environmental variable name as Java Home, not as Java. That is why I went ahead and configured Java Home. So you can try out. I mean, I think there are going to be few softwares which might expect a different environmental variables which we have to set it up. So that is the only reason. If Eclipse and Tomcat are going to work without even Java Home, I think no need to give Java Home. But definitely there are few softwares which I encountered where it was expecting a name called Java Home. Yeah. So yeah, these things anyway. See, whenever there is something exception happens or Java is not recognized by a particular server, particular software, right? These answer, I mean, obviously you will get it when if it is Elasticsearch or Kafka. If Kafka is not able to identify a Java installed, I think you will get to know what environmental variables has to be added. But in general, yeah, Path and Java is good enough. But for me, I'm very sure I don't know which one. Whatever I have installed in my machine, that I have installed some 20, 30 different softwares across this MongoDB or Elasticsearch, InfluxDB, Telegraph. Somewhere I think I found it was expecting a Java Home.
Okay. Last question for this JProfiler thing. Do you want me to install now, or else it has only? Are we going to try it on the evaluation version of 10 days?
So good thing with JProfiler is I think you can keep on redeeming it. I think at least 3-4 times I have tried. They always give you the key, so you can probably start installing it. Probably I would say after a day or two.
Okay,
Or
thank you.
even today itself we can do it. That's not a problem. Okay. So we will pause here, and if you definitely have questions, put that in the Q&A sheet. And I also probably want 3-4 minutes of your time sometime today. I'll try to reach out to you just to understand a little bit of the background and kind of experience you have, right? So that for me to just get an understanding of how we can properly structure this course. So I'll probably message you, and depending upon both of our availability, a quick 3-4 minutes call, we'll do it today individually. Okay. And also, yeah, and as I speak, I think I'll get to know little things better, so that these things can be done in more efficient way. Okay, because if everybody knows everything on certain aspect, we can probably agree on to make it a little bit fast rather than going slow on few aspects. So for that, I'll try to understand about whatever your experience and whatever you know already, what you're expecting, right? I think it'll be good for me to structure this more efficiently. So we'll every day we'll stop at this point of time, probably not more than 8:30. I think anyway people have meetings in office, so we'll pass it here and then we'll continue again tomorrow.
Sure. Thanks,
Okay,
Satish.
guys, I'll go and stop the recording. We'll meet again tomorrow.
Satish.
And